Hi, it's Snarky Positivity, and thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to dig a little bit deeper into 14 characteristics of fascism. And this list was compiled by Umberto Eco, who is, let me tell you a little bit about him. He was an Italian medievalist, philosopher, semiotician, which is a student of like signs and symbols, a novelist, a cultural critic, and a political and social commentator. So he came up in 1996, I believe, with this listing of 14 characteristics of fascism that we're going to go through. Now, I'm getting this article specifically from a website called Open Culture, which tagline is the best free cultural and educational media on the web. So they are not necessarily a source, but they are a gathering place for sources. So anyway, let's take a look at what he had to say. One of the key questions facing both journalists and loyal oppositions these days is how do we stay honest as euphemisms and trivializations take over the discourse? Can we use words like fascism, for example, with fidelity to the meaning of that word in world history? The term, after all, devolved decades after World War II into the trite expression fascist pig, writes Umberto Eco in his 1995 essay, Ur-Fascism, used by American radicals 30 years later to refer to a cop who did not approve of their smoking habits. In the 40s, on the other hand, the fight against fascism was a moral duty for every good American and every good Englishman and French partisan, he might have added. Eco grew up under Mussolini's fascist regime, which was certainly a dictatorship, but it was not totally totalitarian, not because of its mildness, but rather because of the philosophical weakness of its ideology. Contrary to common opinion, fascism in Italy had no special philosophy. It did, however, have style, a way of dressing far more influential with its black shirts than Armani, Benetton, or Versace would ever be. The dark humor of the comment indicates a critical consensus about fascism. As a form of extreme nationalism, it ultimately takes on the contours of whatever national culture produces it. So basically saying that fascism isn't itself isn't in itself an ideology, but ideologies can take on forms of fascism. It may seem to tax one word, to make it account for so many different cultural manifestations of authoritarianism across Europe and even South America. Italy may have been the first right-wing dictatorship that took over a European country and got to name the political system. But Eco is perplexed why the word fascism became a synecdoche, that is, a word that could be used for different totalitarian movements. For one thing, he writes, fascism was a fuzzy totalitarianism, a collage of different philosophical and political ideas, a beehive of contradictions. While Eco is firm in claiming there was only one Nazism, he says, the fascist game can be played in many forms, and the name of the game does not change. Eco reduces the qualities of what he calls Ur-Fascism, or eternal fascism, down to 14 typical features. These features, writes the novelist and semiotician, cannot be organized into a system. Many of them contradict each other and are also typical of other kinds of despotism or fanaticism. But it is enough that one of them be present to allow fascism to coagulate around it. Let me say that again. It is enough that one of them be present to allow fascism to coagulate around it. So here are his 14, and these are summarized, and I may go back and do look at the original article that he wrote. It's a lot more meaty, and these are quotes from that meaty article. But just to give you a kind of an overview of what these 14 are, we're just going to go through them really pretty quickly today. The first one is the cult of tradition. And these quotes again are from his original article from 1995. One has only to look at the syllabus of every fascist movement to find the major traditionalist thinkers. The Nazi gnosis was nourished by traditionalist, syncretistic, occult elements. And what that means, traditionalist, is just thinking back that tradition is more powerful than modernism or education or enlightenment. Syncretistic essentially means that it's coming from a variety of sources, but also that the ideology itself holds contradictions. And then occult elements are like supernatural beliefs that are a little bit outside of traditional religious ideologies. So, the culture tradition, I do think that we are seeing that right now, um, particularly in the traditionalist and the syncretistic. Um, the everything about this movement wants us to move backwards towards great again, towards the 1950s, I guess, when everything was great as in the traditional world if you were a hetero cis white male. Anyway, we already have one. We're one for one. The second one is the rejection of modernism. And the quote, "The Enlightenment, the age of reason, is seen as the beginning of modern depravity. In this sense, Ur-Fascism can be defined as irrationalism." So essentially, everything that is progressive and forward moving is depravity. So pretty much all of the letters of the LGBTQ plus IA plus community, all of those are depravity. And this business of women wanting to vote and have checking accounts and hold jobs is it's depravity because it's all modern. We don't like the modernistic. Okay, so we're 2 for 2. The third one, the cult of action for action's sake. And the quote, "Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without any previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation." So let's put tariffs on our allies, our closest trade partners, like Canada and Mexico and the UK, or the EU, I think they call it. Yeah, let's do that. Why? Oh, no. No reason. We're going to do it because we need to show power. We need to show our bulliness. But let's not think it through. Let's not think through the fact that doing this to our allies is going to put us into a trade war that is going to isolate the United States from the rest of the world, which in itself is a whole nother topic of conversation. But anyway, here we are. We're 3 for 3. The fourth one, disagreement is treason. And the quote, "The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community praises disagreement as a way to improve knowledge." So, modernism, progressive movements, science are all moving in the direction of the disagreements that we have with one another are what make us grow and learn and progress. And the fascist ideology does not want anybody to disagree, and to do so is treason. Just yesterday, Elon Musk, who that's a whole nother conversation in itself, but he stated that anybody who was releasing the names of his muskrats were committing crimes. Technically, federal employees, which they are actually not, because they have never been nominated to any positions and they have not actually been hired into an agency that is actually a real thing, because Doge is just a made up thing. But if they were federal employees, that would be open to the public for information. So I don't know why he doesn't want anybody to know the names of these people. But anyway, to disagree with this incoming of muskrats into the Treasury, Department of Treasury, it is treasonous. Okay, great. We're 4 for 4. The fifth one, fear of difference. Oh my goodness gracious. The quote, the first appeal of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against the intruders. Thus, Ur-Fascism is racist by definition. Everything about all of the people who are not cis white males with money is different. We don't like black and brown people. We don't like women. We don't like people in the LGBTQ plus IA plus community. We don't like anybody who, we don't like Muslims. We don't like other religions. So basically, everybody who's not a white Christian nationalist is different. So that's awesome. We're 5 for 5. The sixth one is an appeal to social frustration. One of the most typical features of the historical fascism was the appeal to a frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups. So essentially, by telling the middle class that they are suffering from an economic crisis and the economy is just shit, which actually wasn't true. Under Biden and Harris, the economy was recovering from the COVID pandemic faster than any other G7 nation. So it is simply not true that our economy was shit. But the news from the fascist side is that the economy is shit, and therefore we need to be scared. And we need to be frightened by the lower social groups. So our economy is shit, not because of a COVID pandemic, but because those people, those brown and black people, are taking our jobs. And that's the reason that the economy is shit. So great. We're 6 for 6. Number 7, the obsession with a plot. And the quote, thus, at the root of the Ur-Fascist psychology is the obsession with a plot, possibly an international one. The followers must feel besieged. So Hunter Biden's laptop is a plot against the fascists. The black and brown people are eating your cats and your dogs. They're stealing your jobs. They're violent criminals. Yo, there's no plot. The deep state, right? The baby eating Democrats. The, it's utterly ridiculous. Let's just call it what it is. Utterly ridiculous. But you have to have a plot. Great. We're 7 for 7. Halfway there, at least 50%. Okay, let's keep going. Number 8. The enemy is both strong and weak. By a continuous shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak. So the Democrats have too much power and we have to drain the swamp. And at the same time, the Democrats in power are nasty and they are stupid and we have to take them over because they are too weak to govern, but they're also too strong because they're governing against the will of the people. I mean, it's just okay. It's just dumb. Great. We're 8 for 8. Okay, the 9th. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. For Ur-Fascism, there's no struggle for life, but rather life is lived for struggle. Now, this is an interesting one because essentially what this one is saying is that life is intended to be painful. And that if we live with a greater purpose, that even the pain of this life is worthwhile. So Trump can say, immediately following his executive orders that are intended to cause pain and cruelty, and he can say, yep, it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. But the pain is coming for a greater purpose, and so it's okay. We're 9 for 9. 10, contempt for the weak. Elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology. I mean, everybody that's not a white male Christian nationalist is is poisoning the blood, is eating your cats and dogs, is raping and murdering your loved ones. I mean, it's and it's the people at the bottom of the social hierarchy that are the most vulnerable people that are being targeted, right? Trans community is like 1% of the population, and they just want to live. Like, just let me be. They just want to exist as they are. But we've absolutely vilified them, the most vulnerable population in our communities. And undocumented migrants, who are also incredibly vulnerable. They don't have any protections from the law. They can't go to the police if something happens to them, because if they get found out, they'll get deported. So the most vulnerable among us is who we tend to hate the most. So that's awesome. So we're 10 for 10. 11, everybody is educated to become a hero. In Ur-Fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. This cult of heroism is strictly linked with the cult of death. Now, this is absolutely what happened on January 6th in 2021, which is that all of the people who went to storm the Capitol were willing to die for the cause. They were willing to become heroes and die for the cause. And after they were imprisoned, they were not prisoners. They were not imprisoned for their crimes. No, 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 no. They were heroes. They were hostages. They were the heroes that needed to be freed back into the community, which that's great. All right, awesome. We're 11 for 11. 12, machismo and weaponry. Machismo implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. I mean, what else is there to say? You know, the machismo of the white Christian nationalist men is that we are the protectors of women, and women are weak. Who are they protecting women against? Other fucking men. That's who. But this idea that they can be men, and that it's testosterone and all the bullshit, all that does is it seeks to harm everybody who is not that. Women, LGBTQIA plus community. I mean, it's just we're 12 for 12. 13, selective populism. There is in our future a TV and internet populism in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people. So it used to be they would gather like in big arenas, and the leader would be the voice of the people. Well, now the leader is the voice of the people, but it's on social media. And so essentially what this is saying is that the people, who are not individuals, but a group of people, are of one mind and one voice, and the particular leader that's in power right now is the voice of the people. When in fact, let's take the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The rhetoric is that everybody wants Roe v. Wade overturned, and Trump is the one who did it. It is not true that everybody wants that overturned. It's not true at all. But for Trump to claim to be the voice of the people just gives him that fascist power. And we're 13 for 13. Awesome. The 14th one. Ur-Fascism speaks newspeak. All the Nazi or fascist school books made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax in order to limit the instruments for complex and critical reasoning. So essentially what this is saying is that Trump dumbs down the language and the rhetoric for the masses. And unfortunately, this has been an incredibly effective tool of communication, which I think is in large part one of the reasons why Trump won this last election. I mean, think about this. It's drill, baby, drill. It's poisoning the blood, poisoning the blood, the enemy from within. All of these things are intended to get people to stop using more complex language to think more critically. So awesome. We are 14 for 14 on the fascist scale. So I'm going to stop it right there, and I think I will go back and do later on do a little bit more like one at a time, kind of taking a deeper look with the actual article that Umberto Eco wrote. But I have said that I am snarky positivity, which means we end on a positive note. And here's my positive thought. This is so explicit, and the fact that it's 14 for 14 means that it is so much out there in the open that it is almost impossible not to recognize this for what it is. And because we have such immediate access to information right now, these things cannot happen in the dark. All of this is out there in the open for everybody to see. And what that does is it gives us opportunities to push back. So it's not like the awesomest, best good news, but it is a little bit of good news, which is that we do still, at the moment, have the power and capacity to have a voice and to be able to push back a little bit. So thanks for sticking with me. If you like this content, please subscribe, because I would like to go live and start doing YouTube lives pretty much as soon as possible. And I only need 50 subscribers for that. So please like and subscribe, and thank you. Hang in there. We're going to be okay. Okay, bye.